Hello, guys, and welcome. Today, we're going to have a very interesting speaking class. We're going to talk about five big things our brain is not naturally wired for. And I think it's an interesting topic because we need to understand how our brain works in terms of learning a new language. I think it's going to help us a lot, not only from a learning perspective, but also if we want to experience any type of success in life. I think it's going to help us a lot. Drinking a little bit of water right now. We have to understand the limitations of our brain, especially when it comes to learning. We have to know this, okay? We have to know this to understand how we can work things around, what dynamics we can develop in order to help our brain. Because our brain, just as everything else in this universe, has limitations, okay? So the number one limitation that I would like to highlight is the fact that our brain is not able to think in probabilities. It's actually very bad at thinking in probabilities. Okay, we're not wired to do it that way. And I'm sure you guys are familiar with a lot of the scenarios where people do things and from a probability standpoint does not make any sense. As a matter of fact, it's kind of a bad decision, and people make that decision anyways. Let me give you an example that everyone can recognize. Smoking. Smoking is so bad and so unhealthy that they literally put in the pack of cigarettes, this big message in big letters: smoking will give you cancer. Okay, it says in big letters, it will give you cancer. Okay, and people will buy it. Okay, give me 2 pack of cigarettes. Right? It's number one reason of lung cancer, and it's related to hundreds of diseases. And even that's the case, people will buy cigarettes. So you see, like, it kills millions of people every single year, and people will continue to buy cigarettes and smoke cigarettes. You see, from a probability standpoint, does not make any sense, but people choose to do it. Another good example is the lottery. The lottery from a probability standpoint, it's actually very unlikely for you to win the lottery. You want to hear something very interesting? I actually asked ChatGPT, from a probability standpoint, like if it's true, because I heard once that the probabilities, like you have more probabilities to be struck by a lightning than winning the lottery. And ChatGPT says, yes, it's true. Statistically speaking, the odds of getting struck by lightning in your lifetime, depending on where you live, are about 1 in 15,000. Listen up, 1 in 15,000 to 1 in 20,000. On the other hand, the odds of winning a major lottery jackpot like Powerball or Mega Millions are typically around 1 in 222 million, or even worse. Es más probable que te caiga un rayo a que te ganes la lotería. Como esas loterías que hay en Estados Unidos de Mega Millions o Powerball. Escuchen esto, la probabilidad de que te caiga un rayo, supongamos que vives en Estados Unidos, la probabilidad que te caiga un rayo es 1 en 20,000. La probabilidad que te ganes la lotería, como el Powerball o Mega Millions, es de 1 en 292 millones. Okay? And it's a very low probability. And you know what people will say? It's still a probability. It's still a probability. And our brain is so biased because we see a winner on the news every month. So we believe that just because there is a winner, we're going to be the next winner. Okay, let me give you another example. Um, the riding a motorcycle as an everyday transportation in Nicaragua, unfortunately, people don't drive very well, and the probability to suffer an accident if you use a motorcycle as a transportation mean is almost 70%. Like, did you imagine the chance to suffer an accident going up to 70% because you're choosing to ride a motorcycle? You know, I wouldn't like to do that deal. I wouldn't like to increase the probability to suffer an accident to 70% every single day, just because gas is cheaper, just because, I don't know, any type of pleasure that the motorcycle gives to you. I respect if you use a motorcycle as a transportation mean. I just think 70% is high. It's a high probability. And typically, what we would tell ourselves is, no, that's not going to happen to me. I am going to be very careful. I'm going to be part of that 30% that never suffers an accident, right? And that's what I'm saying. We're Our brain is not wired to think in terms of probabilities, right? And we have to understand that. We have to understand that. Let's take a look at this. It says, for most of our history, human beings did not need to calculate exact probabilities in order to survive. It was more important to react quickly to a potential threat, such as assuming a noise in the bushes was a predator and running away, than to statistically analyze the probability that it was actually a predator. You see, that's what I'm talking about. That there's a big portion of our existence as humanity where there was no need to think in terms of probabilities. And this is the number one reason why our brain is not so good. It's actually very bad. There's no way to sugarcoat this. It's actually very bad at thinking in terms of probabilities. We have to understand that, right? That's one of the 5 limitations we're going to talk about today. Aprovecho para hacer una pausa. Recuerden que tenemos la modalidad híbrida. Es una modalidad que combina clases online con clases en vivo vía Zoom. Es una modalidad que consta de 3 niveles, básico, intermedio y avanzado. Cada nivel toma 4 meses y la idea es que en el término de un año ustedes aprendan el inglés en una forma bastante intuitiva. ¿Sí? Si ya tienen conocimiento en el idioma, se hace un examen de ubicación. Tiene un costo de $69.99 al mes, no hay cargo de inscripción, no hay cargo de cancelación, se paga mes a mes de forma automatizada. Para inscribirse, visiten fiveringsacademy.com. Somos una academia online de inglés para Latinoamérica. Cuando dije eso, la última vez me dijeron, para Latinoamérica, me dijo alguien de español. Para cualquier persona que hable español, es una academia diseñada para personas que hablan español, aprendan en inglés. Conocemos los atajos, es una metodología especializada para hispanohablantes. ¿Okay? $69.99. So let's go back to this. So, ¿cuántas clases por mes? Son 3 clases por semana. ¿Ok? Lo equivalente a eso para un mes son 3 clases por semana. Cada clase dura 1 hora. Un grupo muy pequeño de estudiantes. ¿Ok, Cindy? Un grupo muy pequeño de estudiantes. 3, 4, 5, dependiendo del horario. Lo más que pueden llegar es a 9, 10. Son muy pequeños porque la idea es que ustedes aprendan en la plataforma y practiquen en su clase. Refuercen y expandan el conocimiento mediante la participación. Es un curso 65% speaking, si bien es cierto, se cubre lo que es writing, reading y listening. Es un curso 65% enfocado al speaking, porque al final del día eso es lo que más hace el individuo con el idioma, ¿no? Utilizarlo de manera oral con otras personas en su día a día. So you see, let's go back to the topic at hand. Thinking in probabilities. We're so bad at it. And this is the reason why. Okay? Now, why is it so hard? When we study our brain, this is what we know so far about our brain. It is hard because of the limbic system. And what is the limbic system? The limbic system is that part of the brain that manages emotions and immediate desires. It's very powerful and drives us to seek pleasure or avoid pain in the moment. Okay, this is the one responsible of us looking for pleasure and avoiding pain. They call it the pain and pleasure principle, right? Like if you take a look at most of the things we do in our lives, it's always going to be based on this, pain pleasure principle. We look for pleasure, any way of satisfaction, and avoiding pain. The other part of our brain is the prefrontal cortex, which is the part responsible for rational thinking, planning, and self-control. It's weaker when facing immediate emotions, especially without proper training. You see, that's what I'm talking about. We're emotional creatures. We as human beings, we are emotional creatures. Our emotions are predominant. Even though we have this prefrontal cortex, this part is weaker when it comes to immediate emotions, right? So we think we're rational people, we're emotional first. Yes, we do have consciousness, we do have a moral compass, a sense of morality, but at the same time, our emotions go first. Okay. It's interesting. I used to do sales for a couple of years, and one of the things they teach you in sales is that people buy emotionally, you know, people buy emotionally and they try to be rational about justifying the purchase. They would use rationality to justify the purchase they made emotionally, right? So we always buy because there's an emotional need, always, right? Take a look at jewelry, for example. When you buy jewelry, you're not buying jewelry just because. You're buying jewelry because you're buying to some degree elegance, fashion, social validation, beauty to some extent, right? There's some personal projection that you want to portray, you want to share it to the society, and that's why you buy jewelry in the first place, right? When you're buying a vacation package, let's say you're buying a vacation package to Hawaii, you're doing it mainly because you're looking for pleasure, entertainment, unforgettable moments, you're buying experience. So there's always an emotional need, always, always an emotional need. Okay. So it's actually important to know this aspect of your brain, the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex. Okay, and we have to understand that the limbic system is more powerful. Does that make sense, guys? Do you guys understand this part so far? Now let's talk about a concept. Let's talk about a term that is very interesting: heuristics. Okay, and every time you hear the word heuristics, I want you to think about a mental shortcut. Okay. To save mental energy, the brain uses mental shortcuts, heuristics, that work quickly but are not always accurate. This leads us to systematic errors when evaluating risks, probabilities, or random events. So you see, these are simplifications that our brain always make, but it comes with disadvantages. Okay. We're going to take a look at the different heuristics that we have. We have availability heuristic. And availability heuristic is when we judge something as more likely simply because we can easily recall it. And an example of this would be after seeing news reports about plane crashes, a person believes flying is very dangerous, even though statistically it is much safer than driving a car. You see, that's a cognitive bias. That's a glitch we have in our brain. Okay? We judge something as more likely simply because we can easily recall it. Imagínense el sesgo cognitivo que nuestro cerebro tiene esta predisposición a creer que algo sucede más a menudo porque podemos recordarlo más rápido. ¿Sí? Se crea una percepción general solo porque esto el cerebro lo tiene de manera predominante. El ejemplo que está acá es muy interesante. ¿Se acuerdan que en diciembre hubo un fenómeno que miramos en TikTok, que los aviones se estrellaban y se estrellaban y se estrellaban y se estrellaban? En Europa, hubo uno creo en Canadá, en África, no recuerdo, en Asia, sí, se estrellaron bastantes aviones, varios, pero en comparación a la cantidad de aviones que traficaban a nivel diario, a nivel semanal, eso era un 0.00001. Estadísticamente, es más seguro viajar en avión que viajar en automóvil. Hay mucho más automóviles, estadísticamente hablando, ¿verdad? Hay muchos más accidentes de tráfico, statistically, right? Statistically speaking, it's much safer than driving a car. But since you're watching news about it, you're watching news about plane crashes, you become very skeptical about traveling by plane. Does that make sense? So that's a cognitive bias. Eso es un sesgo cognitivo que tiene nuestro cerebro y tenemos que entender que estamos cableados a que así funciona nuestro cerebro. Let's go ahead and take a look at another heuristic, representativeness heuristic, and it's the fact of judging the probability of something based on how much it resembles a mental prototype rather than on real data. An example of this would be if you see someone wearing a white coat, you see as a doctor, you immediately assume they are a doctor, and probably that's not the case. Probably that's an actor or a medical student, you know. I saw this video on TikTok about a guy having an epileptic attack, and people were looking for someone able to, do some first aid to that person. And there was someone looking like a nurse, and people were like, do something about it. And she was like, no, I do nails. I do nails. I'm not a nurse. I actually do nails, right? But we have this cognitive bias to create this perception automatically that someone with that particular clothing is a healthcare staff member, right? And that is not the case. So that is representativeness heuristic. Another type of heuristic, and pay attention to this one because this one messes with our pockets. This one messes with our pocket big time. Pay attention to this one because this one messes with our pockets, guys. Anchoring heuristics. And we make decisions based on the first piece of information or number we receive, even if it's not relevant. Let's take a look at one example. It says, if you first see a jacket priced at $500, then another one at $200, you think the second one is a bargain, even though $200 may still be expensive for its quality. I was watching this video in TikTok about a French restaurant that had very expensive prices for the menu. And it would be like $150, $200, right? Like if you wanted to eat a steak, it would be $200, $150. And then they will have another portion of the menu, a section they would never sell, for $750, $800, $900, was absolutely expensive. And the effect was that the reason why that section was there was for you to see that section. You would see like, oh my God, it is really expensive. Let me go back to the $150 option. When the truth of the matter is that $150 is also very expensive. But they made you, have this reaction. Oh, $800. Let me go back to $150. That way you wouldn't object about the price. Does that make sense? Do you guys understand this anchoring heuristic? Does that make sense what I just explained? Yes? Pregunta alguien en el chat. How can I subscribe for the course? Okay, you go to fiveringsacademy.com. That's our website. Okay, that's the first thing that you need to do. Go to fiveringsacademy.com and look for the hybrid modality. Okay, and the hybrid modality is you take online courses, you have access to a platform 24/7, and also you have live classes with a live instructor, coach, teacher, whatever you want to call it, 3 times a week. And it's online, it's live through Zoom. Okay, this is going to be a video class through Zoom, live with a live teacher and a small group of students. We have 3 levels, basic, intermediate, and advanced. If you have already background in the language, if you have previous knowledge, we make a placement test to determine what's the right level of English for you. Okay, it's $69.99 a month. There is no registration fee. There is no cancellation fee. And the idea is to finish the course in 1 year. If you finish the course from A to Z, you have the capacity to manage the language in a very intuitive way, okay, with a big fluency. So $69.99 a month, and no registration fee, no cancellation fee. Go to fiveringsacademy.com, okay? fiveringsacademy.com, modalidad híbrida, $69.99 al mes. No hay cargo de inscripción, no hay cargo de cancelación, okay? Es una modalidad que combina una plataforma en línea, 100% en línea, con clases en vivo, ¿sí? Vía Zoom, con un profesor y un grupo pequeño de estudiantes. Ambas se combinan. Tú vas aprendiendo en la plataforma y vas ejercitando, reforzando y expandiendo en las clases vía Zoom. Hay 3 niveles, básico, intermedio y avanzado. Cada nivel toma 4 meses. O sea que el curso, la idea es terminarlo al término de un año, ¿sí? No hay cargo de cancelación, no hay cargo de inscripción. Perfect. So let's go ahead and continue. Are you guys clear about anchoring heuristic? About this particular heuristic? See, there's a lot of things we have to understand and know about our brain. Effect heuristic. Let's talk about this one. We make quick decisions based on positive or negative emotions towards something. An example of this would be if you feel good about a brand because its advertisement made you emotional, you might overestimate the actual quality of its products without doing a good assessment of the product objectively, right? So this is a good example of luxury fashion items. Have you seen this in TikTok? It's very famous right now because of this tariff situation going on in the United States. Did you see what Chinese manufacturers are doing to luxury fashion companies in the US? Um, I don't know. What are the brands? Gucci. Um, what's the other one? Ralph Lauren. What's the other one? Um, all these, luxury brands. I don't even know the names. They were made in China, and then, they were sent to Italy to stick the logo or, final adjustments, but it was mainly made in China. And these brands, these items that were like $40,000, $35,000, the truth of the matter was that they were made for a fraction of that price. $500, $200, $300. The rest is the narrative that the brand offers you. And we're very biased once we believe that narrative. I think iPhone it's a very good example. You see, Louis Vuitton. There you go. Thank you so much, Jesse. Louis Vuitton, right? Like all these high luxury brands were affected when all these Chinese people were saying, "We make them." You just put the logo and then you pump the prices, right? It's a very interesting phenomenon. Um, I think iPhone is another example, right? Because when we talk about iPhone, to some degree, social currency. iPhone is social currency. The perception you have about iPhones are top of the line phones, very elegant. They have the best camera. It's quality, elegance, status, and that's why they are very expensive, right? They are the most expensive phones. I think the latest iPhone is how much? $1,500, $1,600, something like that, right? But here's an interesting thing. People also believe Chinese products are bad, right? Like that's the general consensus. The general perception about Chinese products is that Chinese products are bad, are cheap, they are low quality. So that's the interesting thing. iPhones are made in China. You will literally see in the box it says designed in California, USA, made in China. It's made in China. So it's interesting how when it comes to iPhones, they don't hide it. They put it on the box. They put it on the back of the phone. It's made in China. They don't hide. But it's interesting how, even though we have this perception about Chinese products, we still believe iPhone is a top of the line item and it's a very good product, which it is. Which it is. They are great phones. But it's interesting how we're willing to put that aside to still believe in this narrative that the Apple brand offers you. Does that make sense, guys? Yes? What happens is that those who believe China is cheap is because they buy the cheapest. I agree with you 100%. I think it has to be more popular the fact that China manufactures products of different type of qualities, right? Like they do very cheap, not so cheap, and they do also top of the line products. Okay, I agree with you 100%. I think the best example of that is Huawei. They are great phones. They are top of the line phones. B like what's the brand for the electric cars? BYD, BOYD. I don't remember. Those are very nice cars as well. So you see, this is they call it effect heuristic. Even if I'm trying to have this objective conversation with you, since you already believe this narrative, you are not going to be as objective as you should. Okay. And that's another flaw we have in our brain. Simulation heuristic. Let's take a look at this one. Simulation heuristic. We think about the probability of an event based on how easy it is to imagine it. Unbelievable how our brain works, right? The default setting that we have. For example, after failing an exam without studying, it's easy to imagine that if I had studied 1 more hour, I would have passed. Even though in reality, you might have needed, you know, much more effort to succeed. So you see, this simulation heuristics is also very interesting, you know. I don't know if you guys have gone to a casino, you know. Um, I have gone to a particular casino in Managua, the capital of Nicaragua, because I'm from Nicaragua. Because they like I don't bet, I don't gamble, but they have like this very nice restaurants. I love chicken wings. I love wings. And um but sometimes I hear people, you know, like they are in the actual casino and they say things like, "Oh, you know, I didn't throw the dices this way, that's why I lost." Right? So we tend to believe that we have control of random events, and we create these narratives of, oh, because I didn't throw it this way, or I didn't do this, I didn't cross my fingers, that's why I lost. That's why I didn't go through, it didn't happen, right? That's simulation heuristic. Does that make sense, guys? So that's simulation heuristic. So what's another limitation that we have? Another limitation that we have is thinking long term. Okay, we are not designed to think in long term. Okay, and the reason why we are not set up that way is because our brain prioritizes or labels things as real to whatever the five senses can interact with, right? So the brain is like, if I can touch it, if I can see it, if I can smell it, if I can hear it, if I can taste it, then it's real. Okay, it has this natural inclination to label as real whatever the five senses can interact with. And that's the problem with the future. If you think about it, the future is something we cannot interact with directly with the senses. It's more like a projection, it's more like an idea. So, since the brain cannot interact with the future, there is this interpretation of it's not real. And if it's not real, I am not going to prioritize it. Does that make sense? That's why it's so hard for human beings to have this long term projection, this long term thinking. It's not natural in humans. I don't know if you guys have seen this interview of Jeff Bezos. Someone asked him, what's your secret weapon? What's your secret sauce? What makes you different? What makes you a different CEO? And he said, my capacity to think long term, my capacity to interact with the future in a way the average people can't. You know, like when people is congratulating me for the results of the current quarter, that's for me past tense. Like I was thinking about that quarter a long time ago. It just manifested right now, right? Because there's a delay between action and reaction. But that's my secret sauce, he said, my capacity to think long term, to involve the future in a vivid way. That's not natural in human beings, he said. And it's very interesting if you think about it, right? It's very interesting that we underestimate the future just because our five senses are not able to interact with it, right? For sure. So let's go ahead and continue. What's another limitation that we have in our brain? Making rational and objective decisions. The brain is not naturally wired to be 100% rational. Evolutionarily, emotions were the main driver of action: fear, anger, love, and so on. Today, even though we're more aware of emotions, still strongly influence our emotions, still strongly influence our decisions. I know we have rationality, and I know we have common sense, and I know we have a moral compass, and I know we have a set of values. Okay? But making rational and objective decisions is not natural for our brain. We're not naturally wired to be 100% rational. Okay? Which is actually a beautiful thing, this combination of emotions and emotions and rationality. It's a beautiful balance. And finally, accepting change and stepping out of the comfort zone. Okay, this is the one. Um, this is the one you have to take into consideration when it comes to learning languages. This is the one you have to pay attention to, guys. Esto viene del paleolítico, ¿no? Te tenías que defender de un depredador, creábamos una cueva, ya estabas salvo del depredador, ¿verdad? Entonces, es hoy en día, como no hay depredadores, hoy en día lo que hace el cerebro es crearte una zona de confort, ¿sí? Eso se llama zona de confort. Y está constituida por hábitos, creencias, narrativas, ¿sí? Percepciones ya establecidas, sesgos cognitivos, ¿verdad? Entonces, ¿qué es lo que pasa? Aunque se oiga horrible, pero es la verdad, aunque se oiga horrible, eh, la función principal de nuestro cerebro es que sobrevivamos, es mantenerte vivo, no que seas exitoso, ¿ok? Es mantenerte vivo. Entonces, para mantenerte vivo, lo primero que construye es una zona de confort. Y fuera de esa zona de confort, el cerebro tiene una reacción de, espérate, Jesse, te estás saliendo de la zona de confort, yo no conozco lo que hay fuera de eso, es riesgoso fuera de eso, ¿sí? Yo necesito que regreses, porque si tú estás afuera de esa zona de confort, yo no puedo mantenerte vivo. Entonces, cuando aprendes un idioma, ¿ok? Y aquí viene la parte psicológica, cuando vos aprendes un idioma, vos estás sacando a tu cerebro fuera de tu zona de confort porque el cerebro ya aprendió una sintaxis de comunicación, ¿sí? El cerebro ya aprendió a comunicarse con otros seres humanos. Entonces el cerebro se estremece y dice que, espérate, ¿cómo así que vamos a aprender a comunicarnos? Este software yo ya lo aprendí. ¿Cómo eso que nueva gramática, nueva fonética, nuevas reglas, nuevos verbos, nuevos... No, 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 nada de eso. Regresar, regresar. Entonces, como seguimos saliendo, el cerebro tiende a activar estas creencias autolimitantes, comienza a activar miedo, que es su mecanismo por excelencia para que vos regreses a la zona de confort, y comienzan estos pensamientos y estas narrativas de el inglés es difícil, ¿sí? Vos no sos tan bueno para esto. Recordá que esto a vos te cuesta, ¿sí? Y ya poniéndote ahí, comenzás a sentirte en una forma negativa y terminás dándole la razón y regresás a tu zona de confort, ¿sí? Entonces hay que entender que el miedo es un mecanismo que activa tu cerebro para que regreses a tu zona de confort. Si se ponen a pensar desde esa óptica, muchachos, aprender un idioma es algo extraordinario. Un segundo idioma, es algo que va en contra de tu naturaleza. Estás saliendo de tu zona de confort. Entonces, sabiendo todas estas cosas, al cerebro hay que ayudarle, ¿sí? Hay que ayudarle al cerebro, ¿sí? ¿Y cómo ayudamos al cerebro? Bueno, con consistencia y no con intensidad. ¿Sí? Al cerebro hay que ayudarle con consistencia. Tanto tu mente como tu cuerpo están diseñados para hacer cosas extraordinarias siempre y cuando vos seas consistente y hagas los cambios de manera gradual. Ni a tu cuerpo ni a tu mente le gusta la intensidad. No estamos diseñados para soportar altos niveles de intensidad. ¿Sí? Las mejores cosas nuestro cerebro las logra con gradualidad y consistencia. Entonces comencemos ayudándole al cerebro. Esto es como ir al gimnasio, muchachos. Si ustedes han ido al gimnasio, ¿qué haces cuando vas a levantar barra? Primero haces la sentadilla sin barra, después la haces con barra, después cuando ya estás cómodo le pones los disquitos de 5 libras, después cuando estás cómodo los discos de 10 y así vas de manera sucesiva, sucesivamente hasta que llegas a 45, un disco de 45 en cada lado, a veces hasta dos discos de 45 en cada lado, pero por la gradualidad, ¿no? Por la consistencia que tuviste y que acostumbraste a tu cerebro. Si vos pones esos dos discos de 45 en el día 1, es muy probable que te dé una hernia o que se te desgarre el músculo. Tanto tu mente como tu cerebro no están acostumbrados a la intensidad, están acostumbrados a la gradualidad. Le gusta a tu cerebro la gradualidad. Entonces, ayudémosle creando esa consistencia que si nunca has leído en inglés, comenzá leyendo 5 minutitos. Eso no le va a afectar al cerebro. Aprendete una palabra diario. Una palabra, el cerebro dice, sí, una palabra sí. ¿Sí? No identifica que estás fuera de la zona de confort. ¿Sí? Escribir tu ejercicio de writing 15 minutitos. Hablar 5, 10 minutos. El mismo cerebro te va a decir después, hagamos 20. Sigamos. Pero necesitas estas victorias diarias. Necesitas estas victorias diarias para que tu cerebro comience a crear estas narrativas de que sí se puede. Y en vez de estar resistente a este aprendizaje, va a decir, no, hombre, si yo puedo, si esto es fácil, todos los días yo logro algo. ¿Sí? Entonces hay que dar estas victorias diarias, estas pequeñas victorias diarias. Aprender un idioma es hacer cosas pequeñas y cosas simples de manera consistente por un sostenido periodo de tiempo. ¿Sí? Entonces no nos sofoquemos, ¿sí? Permitámosle al cerebro crear esos surcos neuronales, permitámosle al cerebro que se enriquezca en la fonética, desarrollemos el oído, que cree la memoria muscular. Recordá que ahora estás pronunciando palabras con fonética diferente. Permití que tu boca se acostumbre a esa memoria muscular, que tus oídos la oigan, ¿sí? Que te empapes en la cultura, porque un idioma también es interactuar con su cultura. La mejor manera de interactuar con su cultura es con su arte, o sea, su cine, su música y su literatura. Tienen que explorar esa parte. Entonces eso toma tiempo y está bien que tome tiempo, ¿sí? Entonces tiene que ser una práctica consistente y entender estas limitantes que acabamos de ver el día de hoy. Modalidad híbrida, Five Rings Academy. Vayan al website. Si en el 2025 tienen como objetivo aprender inglés, si la metodología de nosotros, de la academia, consideran de que les puede ayudar, pueden inscribirse fiveringsacademy.com. Buscan la modalidad híbrida de $69.99. Combina clases online con clases en vivo vía Zoom. Estas clases en vivo se dan 3 veces por semana con un profesor en vivo, con un grupo pequeño de estudiantes. Tenemos 3 niveles, básico, intermedio y avanzado. Cada nivel toma 4 meses. La idea es que terminen en un año. ¿Sí? Es un curso muy orientado al speaking. Al final es lo que más hacemos como seres humanos en el día a día. Hablar con otras personas. La vida es hablar. Entonces es un 65% speaking y el otro 35% los otros 3 cuadrantes. Reading, writing y listening.
Recuerda suscribirte a nuestro canal y activar las notificaciones para estar al tanto de todo nuestro contenido. De igual forma, recuerda dejar en los comentarios cualquier tema o aspecto del idioma inglés que te gustaría que abordáramos en nuestros siguientes videos.